and gentlemen, let's get going.
All right.
Okay?
Cheap, you get lashes.
We are now standing. We've studied till we're almost at the bottom of page 4. Last week we finished with the whole idea that if someone is a mu'ud, what's a mu'ud? How much does a mu'ud pay? Mu'ud, whole. Tam, half. Tam, half, mu'ud, whole. Okay, tam, half, mu'ud, whole. Tam, think of the word tam. Because you know where you have the word tam? You have it in the Haggadah. Because the third son is the tam, the simpleton. So think of the simpleton ox. He's a simpleton, he only pays half. Mu'ud is the aggressive. Mu'ud. He's the aggressive ox. He has already a personality, a reputation to uphold. He pays full. Tam half, mu'ud full. Now last week we came to a conclusion that if something is a mu'ud for a person, that means if it gores a person 3 times and then it gores an ox, how much does it pay? Full. No? Full. Yeah. For the ox, if it gores a person 3 times, because it's a mu'ud la'adam, if it's a mu'ud for a person, it's a mu'ud for an ox. That's it. It already has a bad reputation, and it's a mu'ud. What happens if it gores an ox 3 times, and then it gores a man? How much is he? What is it considered? A tam. He's considered a tam. So mu'ud la'adam, in Talmudic terminology, a mu'ud for a person is always a mu'ud. A mu'ud lebehema, even if it gores something other, because he has a personality and he has a reputation. But if it's a mu'ud lebehema, but if he's a mu'ud for an animal, he does not necessarily be a mu'ud for a person, because a mu'ud for a person, is a little different. A person could, he dresses differently, he acts differently. So the ox, gets excited when he sees a person. So not necessarily. Okay. Now all of these goring, we came to the conclusion, they're all derivatives of horn, right? There's horn. What is another derivative of horn? For those Talmudic scholars we studied last week, come on. Give me another. Biting, good. Give me one more. Falling, good. Kicking, all of these things. Just like it says here. Okay, beautiful. My teacher used to say, I'm testing your knowledge, not your eyesight, when you were cheating. My teacher always said, if I was looking at the Mark's paper like this, it says, Perelmuter, I'm testing your knowledge, not your eyesight, Okay, but nonetheless, this is a very tough class. So all of these things we call derivatives of horn. All of these, biting, chewing, kicking, all of these things. What is the tzad hashava shebineim? What is the common denominator among them? That they don't often happen. They don't happen very often. It's something that the animal gets excited about and then goes and he does it. Okay? Because the first thing we're going to talk about, if we talk about biting, shouldn't biting be part of tooth? There you go. But it's not. Because biting is something different. Like, like a child bites. It doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while it gets excited and it bites. That's a mu'ud. That's a tulda. That's a derivative of horn. Now we're going to switch gears. Okay? So when someone, if a case comes before you, and the guy says, my ox, I got damage. I got damaged by this guy's ox. Okay? What kind of damage was it? It was the ox went ahead and bumped my wall, and the wall fell down. Right, so the rabbi has to listen to this. The 2 guys are screaming at each other. This guy, that guy, this guy. How much does he have to pay for bumping? Half. Why? Because it doesn't normally happen. Okay? So you have to remember, because it's very important to know this. Why is it important? Because if you were a judge sitting there, and now all of a sudden you have a different kind of a case where the ox had such a scratch on his back. He had such a scratch on his back, and he wanted to just alleviate that itch. And he went up to your wall and he's scratching his back on your wall, and you know how much an ox weighs? And the whole wall topples over. How much? Is he going to pay? How much is he going to pay? No, whole. He's going to pay whole. Why? Because he liked it. See, he liked it. So if he likes it, then it's no more a derivative of horn, right? See, a horn is only if it happens haphazardly, that he got nervous, he got excited, and he gored you, or he bit you, or he kicked you. But it wasn't like, oh, you know what, I have this itch on my back, and it's driving him crazy a whole day. I got to scratch this itch. Oh, he goes up against the wall. Oh, or whatever it is, I don't know. An animal has to relieve itself. Relieving yourself is, if you're ever driving down the freeway and you have to go, and you finally go, is it horn? No. It's all tooth. Okay, now as long as we got that straight. That's why it's important to know the intent of the animal.
All right. To know the intent of the animal.
You have to interview it.
I know that, who knows. But is it the characteristics that the animal does certain things characteristically and some things not characteristic?
That's exactly what it is. Now, what's the difference? So why would the Torah say one half and one whole? Because it all comes back to your responsibility. So if your responsibility is going to be where, you know what, you know that your ox is hungry and you let him out for a walk down the street, and then the guy decided to eat, Mark's bushel of apples, you're paying a whole because that ox liked it and you should have been able to protect out of that. Now, if it walks down the street and sees Tim's other ox and both of them, going after each other, there's no way to protect that, so you pay only half. Okay, so you have to understand my responsibility. If I'm the owner of the ox, what can the Torah place upon me? And we have this every, every day over here, in the world. You lend somebody your car. A teenager, you got to be more careful. We're going to be less lenient in court. Even someone more responsible is more responsible. So you have to know the ins and outs. Okay. Now we're going to stop with the horn, and let's get to the other two principal categories, and that is tooth and leg. I'm telling you, biology class over here. Okay. He says like this, Neshicha, then he asks a question. Okay, now where are we going to be?
Where are we?
Biting. You see where it says to be biting?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, Neshicha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. No. 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 lines from the bottom of the middle of the page. The second word is Neshicha. Mark on it. Go down. 12 lines from the bottom. Count up from the bottom. The second word is going to be Neshicha Tulda Deshen. Okay? And we have in the English the biting. We got it? Everybody ready to go? So the Gemara asks a good question. The Talmud asks a question. Neshicha Tulda Deshen. We talked about biting being a derivative of horn. Isn't biting a derivative of tooth? How could you say it's a derivative of horn? Biting is eating. Biting is it's hainuhach. It's exactly the same thing. He says loy. And the Gemara says no. So you see how you're beginning to see how the Gemara is written. It's actually arguing with itself. And the Sheikha told it a Shani. Is the Sheikha not the told it a Shen? Loy. Who's talking? Who's saying? Who's writing? Who's the author? We don't know. It was written. It was authored by an academy of rabbis. But they wrote it in the way so once already it would have made it much easier if they would have had punctuation. See, if they would have put in punctuation with a question mark, with an exclamation point, with a comma, it would have been easier for us to understand. But why go the easy route? If we want to be real Talmudic scholars, because there is the English, right? There's the Schottenstein. It has the vowels and it has all the other stuff. But you know what? Well, I'm going to start off with the hardcore. So he says here, the Shikha told the Shen he loy. Shen, what is the characteristic of tooth? Yesh hanol hazeika. It has pleasure in its damage. So Shen, if it eats a bushel of apples, it scratches its back, it relieves itself. All of these things, all of a sudden, it's feeling a little down, and it'd like to take a little schwitz, and you happen to have a pool of water, and the cow happens to descends into your pool of and it's relaxing there on a hot day in your pool. What is it a derivative of? Shen, tooth. It has nothing to do. It's rolling around in your cool pool. Who cares? That's tooth. Okay, now you try to get the ox out of your pool. That's a different story. But as long as all of the damages it does to your pool, whether it's cleaning the water or whether it's whatever happened, it was because it enjoyed itself.
What about the situation where it bites?
That's a
derivative of horn.
Yeah.
Decides it likes it.
Yeah.
That's hard.
And it says,
well, it actually takes a bite out of the guy.
Yeah.
By doing that would be adjudicated, and 23 rabbis would have to sit with that case. Because then you'd have to interview the ox, sign language, who knows? But generally, you have to have an animal psychologist. But generally, biting is not a derivative of things, because he did it out of anger. He did it out of excitement. Once you do it out of excitement, it falls out of the category of shame. He might have liked it. But it was impossible really to protect against it. That's really the dividing line, whether he okay? So he says, Ha ein hanol lazeka. But biting doesn't have any pleasure in it. It doesn't have any pleasure in its thing. So that's why biting is not a derivative of tooth. Then he says, revitza, ubeita. Falling and kicking? An animal falls and kicks? That's a derivative of horn? Tulda directly. It's kicking, right? It's kicking. How could this be anything else than foot? Come on, let's be serious around here. We're Talmudic scholars. We're letting the Gemara off easy. Isn't this foot? The Gemara says he lie. No, it's not. Why? Rego. When we talk about the derivatives of foot, hazeka motzui, it's frequently damages. It's a frequent damage. We'll get to that in 1 second. A frequent damage. Hani eini zeka motzui. Here, no. This is not a normal damage. You just don't see oxen and cows falling on top of things. Usually they're walking and they're doing their own business. You don't see an animal, oh, look at this, I fell, crack. If that happens, it's something out of the ordinary. And if it's something out of the ordinary, it takes it out of the derivative. It takes it out of the category of foot, because foot, what would be an example of a common damage caused by a foot?
Fell into a ditch?
Well, if he fell into a ditch, that's the ditch gave him the things. We're talking about a foot. Normally, let's say foot. How about if he kicks a pebble, and the pebble flies into your pot that's standing there, your flower pot, and he kicks a pebble. See, that's more likely to happen than him kicking you, because an ox doesn't kick. But what an ox doesn't do very well is watch where he's going, right? So he's walking down the street and he's lumbering along, and with his horn, he happens to, just pick you up by your seat of your pants, and he carries you for 3 blocks, and you're screaming and kicking, and and then he lets you down. That's more likely to happen than if the ox is going to kick you. Ox generally don't kick, and he certainly is not going to fall on you. But if he did fall and he did kick, that's something out of the ordinary where you can. But just think about an ox. I know not many of us are farmers, but we've seen enough books and we've read enough books as children to know, just think in your mind, the normal activities of what an ox does. He's walking down the street on Pine in the middle of the day. Think about this. You let him out of Pine Street, Pine Street, let's say Pine and Ocean, and he's walking up towards Broadway or something around there, and the ox is he's walking up towards 3rd Street. I'm just thinking of that area where a lot of people are coming out in restaurants. And think of the damages an ox would normally cause, not when he gets excited, but just on his daily thing. His head is banging. He could be knocking over glasses. Because people sit outside, right? And all those restaurants are outdoor restaurants. So the poor guy's eating an enchilada, and next thing he knows, the horn comes and tips over his enchilada. This guy's walking and he tips over there. So that's normal events of what we call foot. Because that happens in his normal, doesn't get excited, he's doing his own thing. Those you're going to pay full for. Because those you should have known by letting your ox out at 12 o'clock on Pine when everybody is leaving. No, that's your fault. Okay? So now we have a question. Remember, going way back, what is the difference between, thinking this is put on your Talmudic hats, what is the difference between the principles and the derivatives? Remember, we had Rav Papa made a statement way back when that there are going to be differences between the principles and the derivatives. So far we haven't found any, right? Because the derivatives of horn pay how much? How much? Derivatives of horn pay?
Half.
Oh, beautiful. Half. Good. The derivatives of tooth pay? Whole. Okay. The derivatives of foot pay?
Full.
Oh, good. Okay, good. All right, so we're on the same page now, okay? All the derivatives pay exactly what the principle would pay. So where's the difference? So we still haven't come up with it yet. So he says, Ella, told they say in Lavka Yoitza Behen, this statement that the derivatives are not the same as the principles, the Omer of Papa, which Rav Papa mentioned to us way back when in the first part of the class, Ahi, Where is he talking about this? Give me one case, Rav Papa, give me one case where the derivative and the principle have different. I want to know one case. What would be the case? One case of a derivative that only pays half. If we could find one case of a derivative of tooth which only pays half, they would say, now we know why some are called principles and why some are called derivatives. You see, principle is like a nuclear bomb. That's like the worst you could get. The derivatives are like small cluster bombs, just little bombs, napalm, they just kill you, but they don't kill everybody around you, or they don't do all of that stuff. So give me one case. So he says, Ilema, if you want to say, Ahani, those that we just previously mentioned, right? So on the one, Maishna Karen, Ted, could you do me a favor? Are you going down for a second? Could you do me a favor, please? Could you, no, don't close the door. That would just kill me off completely. But could you go downstairs and ask the front desk to find the last engineering guy on earth to turn off the heat, please?
I'll do that.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
If it scores another ox?
What?
If an ox scores another ox?
Yes.
Is a derivative?
No, that's Karen. If an ox gores, that's horn. That would be horn.
What was your question then? I'm sorry.
No, the question would be, we need to find a derivative, a case where it is a derivative of tooth or a foot that only pays half damages. That's really what we're looking for. That's what the Talmud says. He says, Maishna Karen, what's the difference of a horn? The kavanase lahazik, its intent was to harm you. This is what the animal was thinking. When it's goring another ox, its intent is to hurt that other ox, right? And it belongs to you. You see, some people are smart, right? Some people don't want to have the responsibility. What do? They give up ownership. You know what? It's not mine, right? It's not mine. The horse walks out of the barn and the guy makes a proclamation, the ox is ownerless. Once he does that, there's no more responsibility. Forget about it. It's over. So that's what he has to say. It is your property. If you give up ownership and the ox goes and then does damage, you can't come to me. It's not my ox. What?
Did a lot of people do that?
I don't think a lot of people did it because oxen were very expensive.
But it had to be before the fact too, right? You can't just.
It had to be before. No.
Injured.
Yeah, okay.
I released
No, it had to be before. Now exactly where the parameters were, what exactly he had to say, I don't think he had to go to court to make a declaration. Even if he declared it publicly that this ox is free, I don't own it anymore, wherever this ox is, anybody could take ownership of it, then it's not yours anymore, and you can't be held responsible.
That wouldn't make it really on the oxen.
Exactly. That means it's ownerless. It's hefker. This is called in Talmudic terminology. This is called hefker. Hefker means ownerless. Sometimes the rabbis had in their power to make your property ownerless. Like if you didn't do certain things and follow the rules of the Torah, they would put a proclamation that Perelmuter's land is ownerless. They took away my property. Okay? So then everybody came and put a stake in the land and then, and got it. Whatever it is. So there was this whole idea of ownerless property. And it existed. Okay, go ahead.
What if someone stole the ox?
Oh, that's a good question. That's an excellent question. If someone stole the ox and it did damage, you can argue well in court, the owner can argue that the damage happened under the ownership of the thief. You would have a good case. You would have a good case, and the thief would probably be responsible for the damages. Unfortunately, if the thief doesn't have anything, then they could come back to you and they could argue, you know what, he doesn't have anything. We're going back to the deeper pockets, and if it's your ox, but normally what would happen is the thief would have to pay, first of all, for stealing it, double. Right away he gets a double penalty. So if your ox is worth 400 and he stole it, he has to pay you 800. That's called kafel. Then you would have to pay for any damages done under his watch, quote unquote. But that would basically rule. But a lot of times where a thief had nothing, and forget about it. So therefore it has to be your money. It has to be your money. Usmirasun alecha, and it's your responsibility to guard that ox. You can't say, hey, you know what, someone else has to guard it, because there's also certain circumstances. What happens if, you know what, I'm leaving town, and I got an ox, and I go to Mark, I say, Mark, can you do me a favor, please? Can you guard my ox? Now, the guy doesn't guard my ox. You know, the guy is a busy Sunday, he wants to take time off, my ox is now wandering the streets. I come back, I get a bill. I get a bill from the guy down the street, my ox ate his bushels of apples. I come back to Mark and I say, hey, what's the matter? Oh, you lay your ox, I forgot all about your ox. I didn't guard your ox. So now, we have to make a decision. Who's responsible now? Okay, sometimes he is and sometimes he isn't. It depends if he's a paid watchman or an unpaid watchman. That made a very big difference in the Torah. A huge difference if he was paid or unpaid. If he was paid, good chance that he's going to be chayiv. He's going to be responsible for paying for it, unless it was some freaky accident. Then no one's responsible for it. But if he wasn't paid, he was doing me a favor. Too bad. You know, that's my responsibility. I should find a better watchman. Sorry, Mark. I'll find a better one. Yeah. All you have to do is once. Yeah. All you have to do is once, not watch my ox. I'm never hiring you again.
So
okay?
I'm going to Vegas and I leave my ox with him for the weekend. He's my best friend. I didn't pay him.
Okay.
He's not liable. I'm still liable because I didn't pay him.
That's right. That's right. Because he's just doing you a favor. He's doing you a favor, and that's what it is. Now, next time, if you want to make sure that he's going to do a good job, you're going to say, how much do I owe you, and pay him. Once already he's a hired hand, it's very different. It's very different.
Does it have to be monetary?
Or
what if you say, I'll take you out to dinner?
Yeah, it's the same thing. As long as it's shomer sachar, as long as he's getting paid for it, he's getting some compensation, that puts a much greater responsibility on him. Because he's getting something out of it. Doing a favor, well, listen, I did get a favor, but okay, you know, easy come, easy go. You know how it works. So there's in the Torah, there's actually 4 different sets. What if I rent it to you? Huh? I rented you the ox. And then it goes ahead and does damage. Who's responsible? Okay, it depends. It depends. What if I borrowed it? What if you lent it from me? No, hold on. I made that exactly in it. What if I lent it to you and you borrowed it from me? And so it goes out and does damages. Who's responsible? Okay? So all of these cases are very different. There's 4 separate sets of rules. We haven't even got into it because there's a whole chapter dealing just with agency. You know, whether you're a paid agent, unpaid agent, you're a renter, or you're a borrower. See, the borrower and the unpaid agent, they have the least amount of responsibility. Yeah, just borrow. No, I'm sorry. Borrower has the highest level because the borrower is using it, right? So the borrower has the highest level. The unpaid agent, he's the easiest going guy. You know what? Okay, watch it. Don't watch it. You know. But it's a whole different set of. But here he says, you have the responsibility of guarding this. Haninami, these 2, all of these derivatives, kavanos and lahazik, their intent was to damage. Umamoincha, they were your money. Ushpiros alecha, and you had the responsibility of guarding it. So also the derivatives of horn are equal to horn. No changes, no difference. Ella, but we say tulba de keren ke keren. The derivatives of horn are the same as horn. So any time an ox does any kind of damage that falls into these 3 categories, 1, it has to be yours, obviously. 2, you were responsible for guarding it. 3, most important, it has intent to damage. Its intent was to damage. Because normally, what do we say about an ox? An ox is a domesticated animal. It's calm, it's ruhig, doesn't bother anybody unless you bother it. Once already something happens and it does damage, then already all bets are off. Go ahead, Judge.
And the fourth is? It's uncharacteristic.
Yeah, but which falls into the subcategory of its intent to damage. You see, its intent to damage.
It does not normally intend to damage.
Exactly. So that's really what the statement is about. So that basically covers intent to damage. If you want to just extend that parameter, you would say it intends to damage, which is not normally its characteristic and not normally in its everyday stuff. It's different. It got nervous. So like the vice president shot the guy, that would be horn, I think. But it could be shed because he enjoyed it. I don't know. It could be.
It's just important.
No, I'm not calling the vice president an ox. Should we? No. We're not calling. But the vice president, shoots a guy. You have to think, what are the damages? Is it a Karen? It doesn't happen every day. Believe me, I'm not sending my children hunting with him. If he begged me, I don't care
For
how
all
many.
we know, there were already 3 and keep them away from
Oh
them.
no, I'm telling you. I don't care how
Jews don't
many.
go hunting.
What?
Jews don't go hunting.
Sure they do.
Yeah.
bargains.
You know what? I don't care how many contracts to Halliburton I'm looking for. I'm not going hunting with him. It's not worth it. 100 pellets. Okay, anyways, we're getting far afield. Let's think back to the Chikama Rav Papa. And when did Rav Papa say that the derivatives and the principles are not equal? Hashem v'regel. We talk about the derivatives of tooth and the foot. Now remember last week, for those that were here last week, we spent a little bit of time looking at the biblical references to horn, right? Today we're going to do the same thing, except it's not as long as I didn't give everybody chumash, so just follow along with me, to the biblical references of how do we know in general that a tooth and a foot are responsible for damages. Maybe tooth and foot, you're not responsible. Only if the ox damages, then you're responsible. But if you know what, if an ox walks down the street and eats a bushel of apples, too bad. You know what, the owner of the bushel should have been should not have left it in the public domain, or should not have left his gate open, or something. You know, whatever it is. There has to be. So he says in this, Shen v'regel heichi ksivi. Shen and regel, tooth and foot. Where is it written in the Torah that these damages you are going to be responsible for? So he says, Tanya. So let's quote it. I'm just going to quote it. We're not going to go in it. Okay? This is chapter 22 of Exodus. We talked about last week. Oh, now it's cold. I mean, this is normal. Hot, cold, hot, cold. So he says like this. He says in chapter 22, verse. Okay. The air conditioner was on. Verse number 4. Verse number. Here says this. Verse number 4, chapter number 22. Thank you. He says this. Now listen closely. This is verse number 4. If a man permits livestock to devour a field or vineyard, okay, whether he set loose his livestock or he grazed in another's field. Now remember this clearly. I'm going to read that statement again. Whether he set loose the shilach es be'iroi, it means he sent him. He says, "Oh, you're hungry? Go to Weiner's garden. Go to Weiner's garden. What do you want? I have nothing to eat. Go down there. Yeah, a little bit further. Yeah, Weiner, go in there. Then okay, fine. Whether he set loose his livestock, he sent him, or he grazed." He didn't send him. He was just walking down, and Bob takes care of his plants so nicely, and he sees
the oxtail soup.
And and he figures Bob's a nice guy. He's not going to mind. So he walks in there and he eats in another's field. From the best of his field and the best of his vineyard shall he pay. So he has to pay full amount, full damages. Okay? We're closing it up. It's cold.
The heat's off.
What?
The heat is off now.
The heat is off?
Yeah.
I'm fine. Well, I'm fine. I think it's better colder than hot. Hot is very hard to concentrate. Cold, it's not bad. Okay. So then he says like this. So he says v'shilach, and he sent forth. Remember what he says? Whether he set loose his livestock, which means he set loose v'shilach. He sent forth zeharegel. These are the damages concerning foot. Okay? This is where the Torah says that any damage that is done by the foot, he has to pay full responsibility. How do we know that this is foot? Why? Because it says whether he set loose his livestock. Where does that imply in the whole verse that this is dealing with damages of the foot?
He's going to like it.
Oh, because he's going to. Then he quotes from Isaiah. He's going to bring up proof from Isaiah now. Let's see what he says from Isaiah. And then he says another verse, and here he explicitly states it. Meshalchei regel hashoyer, right? Though that sent forth the foot of the ox, v'achamor and the ass. So, look at this. So he says in one verse, v'shilach, and he set forth a damage, and then he says in Isaiah, mishalchei regel, those who sent forth a foot. So we have shilach. Remember, we call this Agzeir Shava. We call this two verses that are very compatible, the same word. So now we learn that what does he mean when we go back to Exodus 22 when it says whether he set loose his livestock, the shilach, What is it talking about? What does he say here? What's the next word in Isaiah? Second word. They sent forth the feet of the ox and the ass. So there we know from that verse, so shilach means that all of the damages of the foot, not kicking. Don't think of the foot as kicking. Think of the foot as all of the damages of the foot. That's quoted in the Torah. Then he says, Obir, okay? Obir besada, and he grazed in another man's field. So what is bir? Zu Hashem. This is all referring to the damages of the tooth. Okay? Obir, and he grazed, is referring to all of the damages he does with his tooth. Okay? So from that verse, whether he set loose his livestock, we know he set loose means what? Damages of the foot. And he grazed, damages of the tooth. Now that makes a lot of sense, right? See, the first one is a little, you have to come and scratch like this, as my teacher would say when it comes to the Gemara. Why do you have to scratch like this? The Talmud sometimes likes to scratch this way. Because he set loose, okay, so he brings a verse from Isaiah. Grazing is a slam dunk. I mean, you don't have to be Rav Asher or Ravina to know, but when you're learning the Chumash, that it refers to damages of the tooth. If I pulled in a guy off the street who never studied one word of the Talmud, and I said, what do you think these damages are? Grazing in another man's field. He would say, tooth. If I asked him whether he set loose his livestock, he wouldn't say foot. That doesn't work. You have to know Isaiah. Thanks, Ted. You left, it froze up here.
That's what it's like.
I'm telling you. I'm telling you. So he says, then he continues, and he wants to bring another proof. He says at the end of the things, kasha yervarer, as the tooth consumes haglal atumai, right? He consumes it completely. Consumes it completely. So what is it? So he uses the word. Now we're going from page 4 to page Gimel. So now we're going. You see where he quotes from Kings. Kasha yervarer haglal atumai, as the tooth consumeth to eternity. He eats everything. So you have beer and you have yavair. So now you have together the two lashonis, the two verbs of what do you call that? Of consuming, and consuming is referring to. Okay. Is everybody clear about that right now? Yeah. We're all clear? No? Okay. Tim says no. But we say right now, when I send forth my livestock, that's referring to damages of the foot. He grazed in the field is tooth. Okay. Now,
Tooth is
go ahead.
pleasure.
Tooth is pleasure.
Okay,
Foot,
so when an ox eats,
yeah,
it's always for pleasure.
always pleasure.
Okay, and then, whoops, where's my notes?
Usually.
So, yeah.
I would say, yeah, usually eating is for
Something
pleasure.
he hates.
He's not eating because he just, he has to get that
Human
double.
being would do that.
Yeah, a human being is going to eat for spite.
Yeah. But
For
animal,
spite.
it's not in its
Just
nature.
to get back to their mother. Yeah. Yeah. It's not in the nature. Yeah, you don't want me to eat? Okay, I'm going to eat. Watch this, Mom.
Okay, so,
Okay.
and then, foot is what an animal does naturally.
Correct. All of
If
the
you pat it
damages,
on the butt, it's gonna go that way.
if you pat it on the butt,
When you say go to that,
yeah, but if you just let it loose, you don't have to do anything to it. You just didn't watch it. You woke
Yeah.
up in the morning and you forgot to close your gate, and the animal decided to take a stroll down Main Street. You're in trouble. Believe me, something is going to happen. An ox and Main Street just don't work together. A lot of people, children, things, a pane of glass. Guys are carrying a goodbye to that pane of glass. Okay? Guys carrying a wedding cake, goodbye to that wedding cake. So the ox could be walking 2 blocks down Main Street and you're going to be in for thousands of dollars. Literally thousands of dollars. Okay? So now the Gemara is now going to analyze. It's going to really discuss everything that we talked about before. Okay? Amar Mar, the master has enunciated. That means Amar Mar means the Talmud came to the conclusion. We're on top of page Gimel. If you have the name Gimel,
I'm confused with the numbers. We have 2B, 2A, Gimel.
Here's
we have
Gimel.
Roman numeral.
yeah. That's
Greek, calling the
consumeth. It consumeth.
and Deuteronomy and
Yeah.
Kings. I'm confused.
That's. Hey, if you wouldn't be confused, I'd be worried. Amar Mar, the master enunciated. It says like this: V'shilach, and he set forth he set forth his livestock, zua regel. This is the foot. Okay, denotes all the damages of the foot. And then he brings another verse to strengthen his argument, and he says, "Meshalchei regel, he who set forth the feet, hashor v'chamoyer, of the ox and of the ass." Right? So therefore, now you know that setting forth a damage is referring to the damages of the feet. Taima de kosav rachamona. The reason why the Torah wrote Meshalchei regel, why he gave us the verse in Isaiah to tell us that sent forth the feet, hashor v'hachamoyer, of the ox and of the ass, holav. So without this verse, without the strength, without him bringing another proof from Isaiah, now listen closely to what the Talmud is trying to ask over here. Holav. So without that verse, well, let's say Isaiah didn't exist. We never had that verse. How would we interpret this verse in Exodus? When he set forth his livestock, it's ambiguous, right? We don't know which is it. Is it horn? Is it tooth? Is it foot? We don't know. Now we need a proof from Isaiah. So the Talmud asks, what if we didn't have the verse from Isaiah? What would happen if we wouldn't? How would we interpret it? Let's say I'm giving you a test, okay? I'm bringing this in. I want you to interpret this verse. What is it referring to? Karen, if you say, no, Rabbi, it's not referring to foot, it's referring to horn. Could it be referring to horn? Why would it not be referring to horn?
Because there's no aggression.
We're not talking about aggression. It's not kicking. No, he says here, whether he set loose his livestock. Now, I can interpret set loose his livestock, meaning that the ox, why he walked down the street, he got nervous, and he bashed into someone else's ox. Why couldn't I say it's Karen? Because remember last week, we already had a verse dealing with horns. We already had 2 verses last week dealing with goring. So why would God again tell us all about goring and about horn? Ksiv, it's already written. So we eliminate the possibility of this verse referring to what? Horn. Thank you very much.
So it's not ambiguous.
So it's definitely not talking about horn. How about tooth? Ishen. Maybe it's talking about the possibility of it being the damages of tooth. Ksiv. The tooth is written because what we all admitted, right? When he grazed in another's field is referring to tooth. So what could that be referring to? Only to
Tooth.
No, regular tooth and...
No, so if it can't be Karen, it can't be horn, and it can't be tooth, what is it referring to? Foot. Okay, foot, that's the way. Okay. Process of elimination. So the Talmud asks, why do you have to give me another verse? Why do you have to quote the verse from Isaiah? If the verse from Exodus, we've already eliminated all of the damages. It can't be foot, it can't be tooth, and it can't be horn. So what is it referring to? Foot. So therefore, what do we need the verse from Isaiah to back it up?
Eliminate any confusion.
Oh, so it's going to get him more confused right now. Because even within each, so now the Talmud is going to say, even within the damages of foot, there's 2 types of damages. And that's why you need 2 verses. Let's finish this thought in just 1 second. And then we'll open up for questions. He says like this. Itztrich, we need it. Why do we need it? The Talmud says like this. Sal kedai tamina. You would want to think, either both of these verses, both when he set loose his livestock and he grazed in another man's field, is both referring to shen, is both referring to tooth. Both are referring to tooth. Not like you people told me. You said it's referring to foot. No, it's referring to tooth. Both. So then you say, why do you need 2 verses for tooth? Tooth is tooth. Why do you need both sets? He let loose his livestock and it grazed in another man's field, both referring to tooth. Because in tooth, there are 2 types of damages the Talmud is going to tell us. Watch this. Watch the ingenuity of the Talmud. So he said this. Ha, the machle karna. Ha, the loy machle karna. One is dealing with a damage which is never going to come back. Finished. He eats a bushel of apples. Those bushels of apples are never ever coming back. Okay? So that is easy to figure out a damage. What happens if he walked by a rose garden and he chewed up all of the roses? Okay? The owner of the ox can say to the owner of the roses, what are you getting so upset? Relax. They'll grow back. So this is a damage which is eventually going to come back. So if a damage that's going to come back, maybe he's not responsible for it. Right? He could argue, the owner of the ox could argue, I'm not saying he's going to be right, but he could argue, hey, that's not a real damage.
No damage was done.
No damage was really done. Because if you wait, it's going to grow back.
He trimmed them for you.
Yeah, he trimmed them for you. Or any damage which is which you don't lose monetary value for. Right? He says the flowers, you know what, he trampled on them, didn't trample on them. But he ate the flowers off, it's going to come back. Don't worry. So we might think, see, in our minds, the guy argues this in court, there might be some basis for this. There might be some that say, let's think about this. You want to charge him $200 for your petunias, or whatever they have over there, your flowers.
Uprooted it by the root.
Right?
Another matter.
Right. That would be a different matter, because once that would be completely killing them. But if they're going to grow back, if they're going to come back, he might say no. So therefore, the Talmud says, what is it? So what are we arguing over here? You would want to think that you need two, both for Michla Dekana Dloi, Michla Dekana Kamash Malon. So the Talmud tells us no, that one is enough. One is therefore tells us another verse from Isaiah to strengthen the argument that the first part of the sentence is dealing with foot, not with tooth. And both types of damages, both the damage of the Michla Dekana, that he completely was a complete loss, or the light Michla Dekana, it wasn't a complete loss, doesn't make a difference. One verse is enough to cover both of them. Okay? Now you have to be, you see, the Talmud goes in many, it tricks you, because you don't even think about that. Who would bifurcate such a kind of a damage? Who would even think of this kind of a thought? But you can't take anything for granted. So the Talmud says some student might say, you know why? No, it's not foot, it's tooth, because tooth you could split. Because two different types of damages by tooth. That which stays, and that which is permanent, that which is temporary. Maybe temporary, no. So the Talmud says no. Kamash Malon. Therefore, you need another verse to tell us. Judge, you had your hand up first. Go ahead.
Okay, so
Oh.
he eats the flowers.
He eats the flowers.
All right, he eats the flowers, not the roots.
Correct.
Top of the flowers.
Temporary damage.
They grow back.
Correct.
Flowers are for beauty. They weren't being used
Right.
for...
Right. This was not a prize. This was not prize flowers that he could prove. Yeah.
He eats the flowers of the perfume maker.
Oh no,
uses
but that's already a different type of a damage.
Yeah.
See, that already he can argue. Hey, those flowers produced perfume, which I lost them. Yeah. That he can show monetary damage. He can show that on that. Even though it's going to come back, but there was damage because I could. It's the same thing. When the guy says, you know what?
That's my livelihood.
Yeah, he ate an apple off the tree.
I'm the apple grower.
Now, could be
I'm the apple.
apple. So he'll say to you, what big deal? The tree will produce more apples. No, this is not going to happen. That's not going to happen because that apple has an intrinsic value to it. The flower, if you're not selling it and it's going to grow back, what kind of it just has some beauty. It has
It's 2 days before Valentine's Day.
Oh no! If you're a Valentine seller, yes. I'm not saying the guy's not responsible for damages. Ultimately, the Talmud says he is responsible for damages. But you could argue that there's a difference in damages.
Right.
You could say sit for 2 days. You know what?
Right.
The guy will be smart. The ox owner will be smart. He'll delay it. Okay? He'll delay. He'll get a notice to come to court. He'll say he's out of town. He'll get another notice. He couldn't find his witnesses. Okay? He delays it for 6 weeks. Where exactly were the damages? Where were the damages? Oh, there's no damages. It's like, the story. It's the story with the guy in the sukkah. The story with the guy in the sukkah. A Jew put up a sukkah. Anyone knows that? A Jew put up a sukkah in a tenement house. The owner of the tenement came over to him and said, no, this is illegal. You can't put up a sukkah. This is an apartment building. You can't put a sukkah in the courtyard. The Jew says, take me to court. I don't care. Okay, takes him to court. He ends up in front of Judge Teitelbaum. Okay, so Judge Teitelbaum, this is of course in New York City. So Judge Teitelbaum listens to the case and says, what do you say? The guy says, it's a courtyard. It's a public courtyard. You can't put a sukkah in the middle of a public courtyard. Okay, what are you saying? He says, well, this is sukkah, I'm a Jew. I have to put up a sukkah. I got to eat somewhere. I can't starve for 8 days. I can't starve. He said, I can't starve. I killed it already. I can't starve. So the judge thinks. He says, okay, the owner is absolutely right. You have 8 days to take down the sukkah.
Yeah.
If after 8 days, then you get a fine. But until 8 days, so everybody walks out of court happy. The owner won, and the Jew won. Okay, so both are happy. So here also, he could stretch this out to say, now if the guy is selling flowers on the Halloween, and Valentine's Day came by, and he couldn't sell the flowers, so he shows him there's a damage right there. That's different. But there are some damages which can grow back, right? You knock out a baby's tooth, for example. So you knock out a big person's tooth. You see, you knock out a big person's tooth. So it's a damage. Look at a hockey player. It doesn't look that good, right? Okay, but if you knocked out a baby's tooth, little baby walks around, 4-year-old kid, he knocked out the tooth. Would you have to pay damages for the tooth? Because they'll say, hey, you know what's going to fall in anyways? I did you a favor, saved your dentist bills. So what do you want from me? And this happens all the time, because kids run and bump into each other. One kid bumps into another kid and knocks out the other kid's tooth. The father sues the other father. He can argue, hey, just let's wait. We'll wait another a year or 2 years or 3 years. It's going to grow in. It's going to fall in anyways. So you have to know these are kind of damages which are not real damages. I guess a kid lost his tooth a year before. That's not going to damage him for life. Now pain and other stuff. Okay, that's very different. But the actual loss.
How do you deal with that?
How would you deal with the loss of the tooth? Well, pain you would have to pay. See, because the pain, that's something you have to pay. Now, he'd have to argue, the father of the lost tooth would have to argue, where's the damage here? Where's the damage? What do you want? So if I'm an adult and he knocks out my tooth, well, okay, let's talk to the girl down the street. Do you want a full tooth mouth guy or a half a tooth mouth guy? If you say you want a half a tooth mouth guy, how much is it worth? What's the difference in value between a guy with no teeth or a guy with teeth? Or a guy with 6 teeth or a guy with a full? Then you can clearly say there's a damage. But a little kid, what would you say to a damage? You couldn't see, you wouldn't be able to say anything. So therefore you would have a tough time collecting on the damage to the kid. Now you could say pain and suffering. You had to take him to a dentist, the tooth might have been loose, all of these things. Then that's a damage. Or you say pain, the kid was in pain, or he needed whatever, that's fine. That's okay.
But
But
we're talking
how do you
about
determine
people's
that?
animals. We're not talking
I'm just talking. I'm talking about animals. But we just switched into
All right.
things. How would you determine that? You'd walk out into the street like we do any type of pain. How would you determine how much pain is worth? You'd ask, Kenny, how much would you like for me to punch out your tooth? I mean, how much was it worth it to you? 10,000? I'll give you a $10,000 check I want one good punch.
Not worth it.
15? 20?
More. More. My smile's my hallmark. He's $1 million too.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Okay, Kenny's a bad example.
Sure.
I'm going to go to a hockey game. $5. So it all depends. It all depends on how much. But that's how you determine how much pain it is. Now today, I think they already have it in contracts. If you lose an arm, if you lose this, if you lose, God forbid, how much the insurance company has to pay you. But in the olden times, that's how they valued a guy. How much is a guy worth? How strong he is? I mean, a one-armed guy is obviously worth less than a two-armed guy if you want him to work. Or a guy that's 20 years old, you want him to lift big hails of these big things of hay is worth more than a 70-year-old guy.
What if he has a hiker?
That's bad. If he has a hiker, then he's really finished as a hunchback. But but then everything is relative. Now, if you want, that's the way it works.
What happens if you're
Is this
in the
story-
farm, you lock the gate, the ox is inside, and you're working in the farm, and then a big wind.
Okay,
like a
so
tornado,
then you would be exempt. Then you would be
knocks over
exempt.
the tree.
You would be exempt from damages.
You would?
You would be exempt from damages. If you did everything that you could possibly do, you locked the gate and it was a good gate, and you could prove all of these things, and then all of a sudden a tremendous tornado came and ripped up the gate and the ox ran out, then you're exempt. Then it's all bets are off. There's nothing you could have done about it.
Then if he eats,
he runs, then all bets are off because the ox is loose now. Once the ox is loose, there's nothing you could do. You could chase the ox. But if they find that you could have stopped it, you could have prevented it, and you didn't, you say, the gate is loose, I have an excuse. Now, that's not going to play in good in court. But if it's extraordinary circumstances and you couldn't do anything about it, of course, you can't. I mean, just like any kind of damage you do. Any kind of damage. I mean, you did everything to protect to watch it, and something happens.
That's for the domesticated animals. Different. If it's an
Yes,
aggressive animal.
yes, absolutely. An aggressive animals, you have to prove that you did. See a certain fence. Like you see a horse's corral. What's a horse's corral? It's nothing. It's a couple of boards. It's nothing. Why? Because you don't expect a horse to jump over that. You don't expect it. But if you have a lion and you put up 2 boards, and you're going to come to court and you're going to say, you know what? I had Leo the lion, but he, he jumped over the boards. No court is going to accept that as a necessary or a sufficient amount of protection. You need a cage, and you need a good cage. But we just had a case here a year or 2 ago, right? No, thank you, no, thank you. A year or 2 ago, we had a case right up here at Topanga Canyon where people had lions. They were holding lions, and they got sued. They were arrested. The lions got out. I mean, for these kind of animals, you need a real strong protection. Just enough. It's not going to be just because you have a little fence. Okay.
Rabbi Perelmuter.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand why we had to have 2 types of proof on that.
Okay.
Can you go over
I'll
that?
go over that. That's a very good question. That's good. He says like this in the verse in Exodus. He has two parts to the sentence. The first part is he shall set loose his livestock, which we've determined he's setting loose his livestock, referring to damages of the foot. The other, grazing in another man's field, is damages of the tooth. So the Talmud asks, the first part had 2 sentences that proved that it was foot. This one from Exodus, and also the one in Isaiah. So the Talmud says, why do you need the Isaiah proof for? Isn't it good enough just this proof that he sets his foot loose? That would be enough for a foot. So the Talmud says no, because we could interpret it that both of these are referring to tooth. How would they both be referring to tooth? The first one would be referring to damages that are not permanent. The second one would be referring to damages that are permanent. Therefore, the Talmud has to bring a second proof from Isaiah to strengthen his argument, to buttress his argument that it's referring to foot.
Okay.
That's basically why he brought the verse from Isaiah.
Okay.
Because there's a possibility that we would not say, because it's not implicit in the verse itself.
It's just buttressing.
Right. It's just buttressing the argument.
Okay.
Okay. Now he says v'hashta. So now we think that see this is how the Talmud works. It sucks you in. He makes you complacent. He thinks, okay, now we know everything, right? We know everything. He says now v'hashta. Now the ukmina, we've established arego, that we've established foot, that the first part of the verse is referring to foot, he who sets loose his livestock. Shen, what about the damages of the tooth? The loy michla karna, that is not permanent. Minolon, how do we know that this would be, he would have to actually pay? See, the Talmud brought up a premise, and now the premise is turning into a question. It's a good question. You said before that damages of permanence and temporary damages are the same. How do you know? It's a good question. Why should he have to pay damages, temporary damages? Maybe if he just ate, the flowers and it's going to grow back, he could argue very well in court he shouldn't have to pay damages. It's going to grow back.
He could argue that maybe his own oxes were going to go in there and feed, and now the oxen have eaten that grass all the way down.
Because you'd have to prove that this is, he uses this for lives, that for food. If he can prove that this was a real damage, but we're talking about here, so he says, because now he's going to say dumya de regel, because this damage is likened to the damages of the foot. Why is it damages of the foot? My regel, just like foot, the loishna michla de karna, v'loishna loy michla de karna. It does, the verse itself, when it comes to foot, doesn't make a difference, doesn't differentiate between permanent and temporary damages, or things that are going to grow back, right? Or non, right? Avshen. So also it's true for tooth. Loishna michla karna, v'loishna loy michla karna. There's no difference made between destruction and non-destruction of corpus, as he talks about here, the body of the thing being destroyed. And even more so, he could say, even as we're looking here, non-destruction of corpus could even possibly even further. Even if he had, flowers that he was going to sell, so he'll sell it next time. What's the big deal? The flowers are going to grow back. You'll sell it next time. So even in that argument, he could even stretch it a little bit more. You push it a little bit more. If he didn't really destroy the body of the thing, he didn't rip it out of the root, he didn't completely, just the tops of it, could be an argument, but he says no. Because foot, when it comes to the argument of foot, there's no differentiation. No differentiation between if it kicked it, if let's say he kicked a pebble and the pebble knocked out the glass, which of course is damage, or the pebble knocked off a top of your flower, which is not destruction of the corpus. There's no differentiation made. So since there's no differentiation made when it comes to damages of foot, there's no differentiation made by the damages of tooth itself. Okay? So here we have an example of where you got me, okay?
Yeah, keep going.
Keep going. As an example here of where you don't need an explicit part in the Torah to tell you everything. Some could be deductive. Some could be deduced by understanding of very basic rules of one part of the Talmud, then we apply it to the other part of the Talmud. So since damages of the foot, there's no differentiation. I mean, there's no difference between the destruction of the corpus of no destruction of the corpus. The same thing is true by shame. There's no difference. Okay, we got through that finally. Shed. This is clearly tooth, right? And he grazed in another's field. What would that be referring to? Definitely tooth, right? And then he brings another proof from Kings. He, the tooth, consumes it to entirety. So now the Gemara asks the same question we did by Rebbe. Time with the cause of Rachamon. The reason why the Torah wrote Kasher Yevar Haglala Tumay, there that he consumes it until its entirety. Therefore, so he shows what? That Yevar consuming is tooth, halav, but without that verse from Kings, what would we talk about? How would we establish this verse? He grazed another man's field. How would we interpret that without the buttress of the verse from Kings? Could we do it? That could mean anything else besides tooth? Anything? Dead silence here. Okay, good, because I myself am confused. So the Gemara says this: Karen, could it be referring to damages of the horn? No, right? It can't be referring to horn. Why? Ksiv, because it's already written. It's already been written in the previous verse. We talked about last week the two verses that talks about goring. Regel, could it be referring to foot? Ksiv, it's written already, right? It's written. What? So why do we need the second verse of Kings? Why does the Gemara buttress this explanation that it grazed in another man's field with a verse from Kings that says that he consumes it entirely? What do you need that for? So he says, Itztrich. We need it, because now we're going to turn the argument that we had before. He says, you know what? You would want to think, both of these verses are really referring to damages of the foot. They're both referring to damages of the foot. They're not talking about tooth. They're both talking about foot. Both talking about foot. How do you get that? So then he explains. One is talking about where he naturally goes. He walked himself. He opened up the gate, and the animal decided to take a walk down the street. He walks down the street. Okay, that's one type of damage. The shalach shluchei. The other one is where the owner sent it. See, the owner said, you know what, why don't you take a little walk? Go for a little walk. And once the owner said, go for a little walk, then it ended up in in Dr. Weiner's patch, and he ate his bananas. So then, it's one thing. But maybe we would think if it walked itself, who knows? Maybe you wouldn't be responsible, because maybe you wouldn't know about it. So he says, Kamash Malon. Now the Talmud tells us that you need that it really is referring to tooth. It's not referring to these two cases of foot, one where he went himself and one where he was sent. Okay? So what's going to be the next logical question? The next logical question of the Talmud is going to be,
Someone else said it?
now once we already have a case now that each one of these two is dealing with a different kind of damage, right? He set loose his livestock, is referring to foot. He grazed another man's field, is referring to damages of tooth. Are we all clear on that?
Yes.
Okay, but now we have a different problem. In foot, we have two types of damages. We have one where he was sent, and one where he went himself. How do you know that both are liable? How do we know that both are liable? Because there's only one statement in the Torah that talks about damages of the foot. Maybe it's only talking about damages when we actually sent him. Right, damages where the ox decided to take a walk himself? Lie. We don't know. Is that true? Are you following me? Okay, let me do this again. You know? Okay, let's start again. We have one verse that's referring to the damages of the foot.
Right.
We all agree to that, right? But in foot itself, we've already brought two cases. How do we know that both cases are liable? Why can't you say in the case of where the guy walked himself, the animal walked himself without the owner's knowledge, why should the owner be liable? Maybe the owner is not liable. Maybe the owner argues in court, you know what? What do you want from me?
Somebody opened.
I was away from town and the ox decided to walk down the street. Why should I be liable for this? If I didn't know, it's one thing if the man sent the ox, hazard. He sends the ox on a walk down the street, and the ox of course is going to get into some kind of trouble. We know that, so therefore you're going to be responsible. But a damage where the owner says, hey, he went himself, how do we know that he's liable?
Because he didn't lock his ox up.
Okay, maybe he doesn't have to.
It's not unusual for an ox to do that.
Oh, but maybe we don't know yet. Maybe he doesn't have to. Maybe the Torah only is going to make you responsible for an ox that you sent. Now all of your arguments are strong. You have a very strong argument, and you have a very strong argument. And we know that both are true. But right now in the Talmud, we need to have an explanation why this kind of a damage would be liable. Because remember, we're starting from ground one. Starting from ground one. We have to start building laws. Okay? So if we're writing our own constitution, and here we're starting, okay, torts. Okay, let's deal with torts. We have a case now where an ox went ahead and walked down the street and it damaged somebody. Is he liable or not? The owner, so what somebody's going to say, some lawyer is going to say, and I guarantee it could be argued, that as long as the guy doesn't know about it, he should be innocent. He should be innocent. Now, we already know the end of the story, where he's not innocent. But originally, before it's written, let's say in the deliberations, in the room,
Because there's nothing else the ox could do. He's either sent, which is the fault of
he's
the
either
guy,
sent to the
or he's loose,
right, exactly.
which is again the fault of the guy.
All right, but we don't know that. So we're ready now. I've already established that fact. But while we're in deliberations, we don't know that. We're taking that for granted. What if the guy went ahead and when the ox knocked down the gate, it was a rickety gate, the ox knocked down the gate or whatever, and it was not a good, we don't know that. The guy could argue in deliberation. Now, of course, once the jury comes out, and what does the jury say? Guilty. Of course, now we know that he has to protect him. He has to protect the ox. He has to guard the ox. But don't forget, we're still talking Salke Daita Aminach. Those three letters that you see in the Talmud, Samach Dal and Aleph. If ever you see the word Samach Dal and Aleph, means Salke Daita Aminach. You might think, which means, what do you mean you might think? You might think while deliberating this case, while the rabbis are arguing this case, some rabbi is going to get up and make a strong case for why he shouldn't be liable. Why he shouldn't be liable. Therefore the Torah says, okay, so now we're going to explain it. So he said like this, where is he? So now that we've established that this verse is dealing with tooth, right? How do we know that an ox that walked by himself, that he wasn't sent, that he's responsible for damages? So then he uses the same argument he used before. Just like the tooth, right? It's likened just like the tooth. Just when it comes to damages of the tooth. There's no difference whether he was sent or he walked himself. If the animal grazed in someone else's farm, he's responsible. We don't care how he got there, right? We're not going to say whether he sent him or he walked. Who cares? He walked in, he grazed, he ate the bushel of apples. He's responsible either way. So the same thing is true by regel. So where's regel? What kind of damages are regel? If he kicked something, or just walking down, he bumped something, or all of those things, it doesn't make a difference whether he was sent or whether he went by himself. Af regel, so also is foot. Loishna sholcha shluchim. There's no difference whether he was sent. Loishna ozla mamela. There's no difference whether he walked by himself or he was sent. Okay.
So the first one is dependent on the second.
Yes, each one now are interdependent. Now we know that each one, by regel and shen, you learn something from each one. Shen, the tooth, doesn't make a difference how it got there, right? We care at the end result. The bottom line is, he ate, you pay. We don't care how if it flew there. I don't care if the ox got wings and he flew into your orchard. You're paying. What about foot? Foot, we say there's no difference whether there's no damage, whether it's permanent or whether the corpus was destroyed, the corpus wasn't destroyed. He kicked it, it fell, it broke, pay. That's it. So now you know that all four cases, whether the damage is permanent, when the damage is temporary, whether the ox got there himself, whether the ox was sent, you pay. In all four categories, you are paying, brother and sister.
Down.
Yeah?
To indicate the movement of the ox. Who's responsible for the movement of the ox, and who's responsible for the consequences of the movement?
Right.
And so that's the way it's broken down.
So ultimately, that's
He's
right.
gotta go
Ultimately,
to the field, and
you-
then he has to do
That's
something
right.
in
So
the-
when the jury decides, after it's decided, you are responsible for everything. We don't care. You didn't guard it. We don't care if you were in Tahiti drinking a nice, whatever it is, Mai Tai on a beach. Too bad. You're going to get...
I'm sorry, did they separate out, if you catch him, he's walking down the street and there's a pimple, but you catch him before he gets to the roses, there's a stop there.
No, one second.
Between foot and tooth, there's gonna be you're gonna stop where the damage is stopped.
Well, did he damage with the pebble?
No,
He kicked the pebble, did it do damage?
he didn't get to kick it, she said.
Oh, if he doesn't get to kick it, there's no damage, you're free.
damage.
If your ox damaged, either way, regel or shed, foot or tooth, you're paying. We don't care. Either way.
So if you stop foot before you get to tooth,
No, one second, if you stop tooth, what do you mean by that?
Why didn't stop him?
he never gets to the field.
So did he do damage with the pebble?
He did damage with the pebble, but
That
that's
you-
not
But
tooth.
no, that's not tooth. So you pay, but you still pay.
But it's still
No,
damage.
but it's foot.
Yeah, so you pay for foot.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's foot. Foot, you see the difference, with foot and pebble and tooth, the tooth, he's got to be there actually. The ox has got to actually be there and eat the damage and do it. See, foot is something different. Foot is he kicks a pebble, it knocks over a barrel that was on fire, or he knocks over things, he damages. He could be a mile away. Right? He could be a mile away. It doesn't make a difference. It's still going to be the damages of foot.
What happens if someone doesn't like this guy who has the ox, and then, and opens the gate, it's in the middle of the night or something, and the ox gets out?
Who's that? Who did this?
Somebody who doesn't like the owner of the ox.
Someone doesn't like the owner of the ox.
He likes
You have to prove that in
I
court.
mean, it had to be
You see,
footsteps or-
if someone did it, that, of course, if someone went ahead, opened up your gate, let your ox
You have to
out,
prove.
that person is responsible. You have to prove that.
Yeah.
You have to prove that. Now, to prove that is a Baitzi Mechaver Oliver Raya. If I want to prove that Tim opened up my gate, I better have witnesses that he did that. Because what I'm really accusing him of doing is I want to take money out of his pocket. Because who's Mark going to sue? Me. Like my ox does damage to Mark's field, he's suing me. He doesn't care about Tim. Doesn't even know Tim. He's suing me. Okay, now I say, hey, me? I saw at night that Tim came and opened up my gate. Okay, so there's a statement in the Talmud, Hamaitzi mechaveroi, olav haraya. If I want to extract money from Tim, the burden of proof is on me, not on Tim. So I say, you know what, didn't you open up my gate? You say, no, I didn't open up your gate. Oh, what gate? Who gate? I never was even in your city, you know. So then I bring witnesses. Okay, I bring witnesses to show that Tim opened up the gate, then I could sue him. But until that time, I can't really do it. I mean, I can argue from today to tomorrow, whatever you want about that ox, but it's my responsibility. Until I know, or I can prove to the court beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I did everything I could to protect it, then I'm liable. I'm liable. You know, because that's basically, you know, I mean that would be like someone taking your car and crashing into somebody else. Who's the guy going to come after? Me.
But that was the owner.
Yeah, of course you're going to come after me. Now I have to prove that it was stolen. So you got to bring a you have to put a police report, and you got to do this, which happens all the time here in LA. All the time. I mean, I've had 2 cars stolen. Oh yeah, 2 cars stolen, and one of them was a 13-year-old kid. I went to court, 13-year-old kid. But they kept me in the witness room. I didn't see him. But the prosecutor said, "Would you like to meet him?" I said, "What do I want to meet him for? When I give my yasher kayach? I throw a kiddush in his honor. What I do?" He said it was a 13-year-old kid. Okay, because I was wondering. Well, I don't know if it ever happened to you that your car was stolen. But you go in the middle, you wake up in the morning, your car's not there. You start to think to yourself, "What an idiot I am! Where's the car? Where's the car?" And I'm looking, it was gone.
If it's in the garage, it wouldn't happen. That's what my husband says.
You know what? This car, I was happy. I was happy. The guy, I had a sign, "Please steal me." You know, get your. And the sad part was, leave the keys in there, the windows open, just take me. But the sad part was, you see, I was the one that ended up getting messed up. Why? Because they found it. You see, if they don't find it, I'm in good shape. The insurance company pays out, good. Mazel tov, they found it. It's in a pound somewhere, who knows where in the Carson. I got to go slip it out of the pound. It's damaged, 500. It's a pain if they find it. So you got to pray, please. If you're going to steal it, God, please. But you know why they do this? You know why they steal? It was interesting, and we're getting far afield. But you know why they steal it? For drive-by shootings. They use my car for a drive-by shooting. Yeah, so why should they shoot out their own car? They can shoot out Perelmuter's car. So you know what? They take my car, and then they say, "Had the rabbi shot up people?" Yeah, of course. You know, and you know who ended up doing my first car? The vice president. No. That's a different.
So Perelmuter takes his bad apples,
Yeah.
and he's the cider maker.
Okay.
He takes the bad apples, wasn't a good year, he's not gonna have a good cider year.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
And he already knows that.
Okay.
So he puts the apples out where he knows
The ox is going to eat
the
it.
ox is going to eat the
Okay.
apples.
So-
and then he sues the ox guy.
Okay, that's a good case. That's a good case. You have here 2 components. First of all, the worthless apples.
Right.
So the worthless apples, or the defendant is immediately going to argue that the apples were completely worthless.
we know.
Oh, okay. So then if he did such a thing, then you'd have to prove that it was protected. Because if he took the apples and he decides he puts it on PCH, and my ox is walking down PCH and he eats the apples, I'm going to argue as a defendant, who gave you the right to put the apples on PCH? PCH is not a place for you to keep apples. So you would say, okay, you know what, I left them there for a moment, so we'd be in court and we'd argue it out. Now they're going to adjudicate, someone is right and someone's lying over here, whatever it is. Now if they know that if there's a bad apple crop, they're obviously going to knock down your claim. You're claiming $3,000 worth. 3,000, get out of here. 3,000 there's no way an ox could eat. Because if you come and you say, you know what? The ox ate 17 bushels. Yeah, 17 bushels in a 3-hour period. Okay? So you're going to have to either prove that this ox is in the Guinness World Book of Records, that this ox is beyond any reasonable ox. Yeah, babe the blue ox. But you'd have to prove that. You bring in Paul Bunyan, into the courthouse. But that's basically how they would adjudicate this case. Prove it. Prove it.
Okay. Same way that we do it now.
The same way we would, absolutely. Now the only difference was in the olden days there was also oaths administered to this. There was all different kinds of other ways. Like an oath wasn't just raise your right hand and swear, do that. But an oath was something serious. People had to hold a Sefer Torah. You had to take an oath. I mean, because there's a lot of things that you really don't know. Like for example, if a guy, if I accused Tim, poor Tim. If I accused him of stealing $100 from me, no, you know what? I accused him of borrowing $100, and he never paid me back. Then he says, no, I paid you back 50. Oh, so now we have this gray area here, right? It's a gray area. He paid me back 50. So see, he'd be better off denying everything. He was a nice guy, and he thought he was going to get into it. It's like the IRS. You know, the IRS, you're better. I'm not no legal expert. So I'm not only telling you this not as a legal tax expert, but you're better off not filing, because if you file and don't pay, it's a bigger right. So you're better off. No, they don't know about you. You don't file. No one knows about you. You might should pish living nowhere, right? But if you file and you say you owe them $25,000, and you say I'm not paying. Okay, this is what Tim did. Tim should have been better off saying, you know what? I never saw you. I don't know you. Bring. I want to see a deed. No, but the guy was a nice guy, and he decided he was going to say, you know what, I paid you back $50. So now, as soon as he opened up his mouth and says, I paid you back $50, he screwed himself. Right? Because he acknowledged that I lent it to him. So now the Torah says, okay, Tim, you're such a good guy. Take an oath. Take an oath. Someone admits that he pays. If he owes half of the claim, he has to take an oath. Now this oath was very serious. They took out a Torah, they put it in Tim's arms. He had to hold the Torah, and they said, you know what? With this oath, we're bringing down the whole weight of Hashem on your head. That if you vow, now this only worked. When did this work? If people believed in this. If most people believed in hope, if people think this was...
You cannot believe the amount of people...
Yeah.
But we don't use the Bible anymore.
Right.
You cannot believe the amount of people who have lied to you straight through the case.
Right.
Raise that right hand, sit in that witness seat, and tell the truth. Their lawyers want to die.
Lawyers have been doing this.
Lawyers want to die.
They've been doing what's news about that.
Lawyers
They've been
wanna
lying
die.
and swearing to things. They should hold the lawyers accountable. They should make them swear on the Bible.
That's another matter.
That's a different story.
Don't
But
get me started.
people still take it seriously.
Yeah.
When they raise their right hand and take that oath.
Well, you know, we have a different. In America, there's another caveat here. It's called perjury.
Yeah.
Because see,
But we mostly don't do that.
Right, I understand. But if God forbid you're caught, so here in the olden days it was a very serious. But it only worked as long as people bought into it. If someone thinks, I'll hold a Sefer Torah, this is the dumbest thing I ever heard, sure, I'll swear, then it doesn't work. But if the rabbi's son, this guy he's been swearing too much, every 2 weeks Tim's in court taking oaths, no. And he's being victimized, then it doesn't work. But if you take it seriously and you swear, then he would get off. He would walk. He takes the oath and he walks, because there's no way I can prove it. I have no deed. No, you'd be finished.
Oh.
You'd say I paid you up, unless I would bring.
I paid half.
Right. You say you paid half. Doesn't have to be half. We paid half. So I either have to bring one of two proofs. Either I have to bring witnesses that I actually gave you 100, or I'd have to bring a star, a deed. If I don't have a star, or I don't have witnesses, all I have is my word against your word. Too bad.
What about a canceled check?
A canceled check, you'd have to prove that was a loan. How would you prove that was a loan?
The check says one.
Oh, no, that's a deed. Then that's a deed. Yeah, that's a deed. That would be as strong as a deed. But as long as I can't prove it, it's my word against his. And then he says...
And you want to take the money out of my pocket?
Correct.
Okay.
And you admit it to 50, you take an oath and you walk. If you say, I don't owe you anything,
No,
I'm finished.
But why?
I'm finished.
but he said he paid you half.
Yeah, so he takes an oath that he doesn't owe the other half and he walks. Finished, goodbye. And I sit in court twiddling my thumbs. Ruining the day that I wasn't smart enough to put it in writing.
But he said, I owe you half. But
No, he didn't say I owe you half.
Oh, I see.
No.
He says
If he says he owes me, yeah, I owe you half, and I paid you half, then Tim is going to pay the whole thing. I mean, if you walk into court and say, oh yeah, I only paid you half, oh thank you. You paid the other half. No, he's claiming the old loan was 50.
Oh, I see.
He said the loan was 50. No, if he admits that it was a $100 loan and they only paid me back 50, that's a no-brainer. I mean, then you'd have a lawyer from Helm say that. A lawyer from Helm would say, you know what, why'd you argue in court? You took 100, but you paid it back 50. Maybe the judge will let you off for being a nice guy. No, that's not going to work. But the idea was that if he denies the whole thing, if he comes into court and says, I don't owe you anything, there's nothing I can do about it. There's absolutely nothing. I could pull my hair from my head. There's nothing I could do. Because I have nothing. No, that's no Torah. I can't do anything. You come into court and you say to me, I don't owe you anything. You know why he's believed? You know why he's believed? Even though I say my word against his word, and even though the burden of course is on me, but you know why he's believed? Besides the fact that look at that face, would he lie? Look at it, Tim would never lie. He's believed because of a chazakah. There's a thing called the chazakah, that there are certain ironclad rules. And one rule is ein adam meyis b'fnei bal chayvei. No one, the Torah could not believe this, that someone is so brazen that I was a good guy and I lent him $100 that he would come to court in front of my face and he would deny it. That's why they believe him. Let me see that face. Yeah. But that's why, because the Torah couldn't believe it. Someone wants to say, you know what? I only owe you 50. I paid you. It was half, and I paid it to you. Okay, but someone that says to me that I didn't anything, nothing, and I say to you, the Torah believes him. Yeah, there's many. We'll get into it in another time. I mean, when it comes into court, an argument back and forth, who is believed, who is not believed. There's sometimes that he's believed. The defendant is believed because of what is called a migui. A migui is a very interesting idea in the Talmud. A migui is an argument which he could have used. So we believe him because if we say, you know what, the argument goes like this. If Tim was a liar, he could have said a bigger lie. Why does he have to say the smaller lie? So since he didn't use the bigger lie, we're going to trust him. Because migui, because he could have said, he could have been really... Exactly. So therefore, since he didn't use the stronger, more pervasive argument, we're gonna let him off with this.
So we don't assume he's dumb?
Well, we try not to assume that he's dumb. But you see, the whole idea was that half of it, judging is a science and it's an art as well. Because half of it is like the judge probably will tell us that half of it is looking in the eyes of the defendants and the plaintiffs and say to them, did you take the money, Tim? And the guy, no. Then you know there's something fishy going on if he's fidgeting, and you get a feeling about it. Now, you can't always rule on a feeling, because feeling that there's facts on the table. But you get to see who's really talking and who's this. But not always is it right, because sometimes you have a guy who's not such a smart guy, and he comes to court, and the other guy is a tough Elaine, he's a tough guy with a silver tongue. So it's not always. But the judges, because that's why you have three. That's why you don't have ein don yechidi. There's no single judge Elahu except him. That's the rule in the Talmud. There's never a case where there's one single judge ruling in a case. There has to be a beth din. Why? Because the three talk among each other and they say, come on. You look at the guys, one guy is lying through his teeth. We know he's lying through his teeth. The other guy, that's why you have to have smart rabbis. And you have to have the number one criteria of rabbis, which it's actually this week's portion. If you read this week's portion, in Jethro, it tells us a lot of things. The Torah is so bright. Jethro comes to visit Moses' son-in-law. 2 days into it, he started to give him advice already. Here's already Moses, who has a relationship like this with God. He went through hell and high water. He went through Pharaoh. 2 days Yisro is visiting, he already starts to give him advice. Why are you doing it this way? Why are you doing it that way? Why are you doing it like that? Why not do it like that? Okay? And he was right, because Moses was the only judge and every case came before him. So he told him, why don't you set up a judiciary? Appoint a number of judges, and each of them will hear a number of cases. The tough ones will come to you. The easy ones, let them judge. See, he set it up. The number one criteria was honesty. Honesty is so important. You know why? Because if you don't have an honest judge, the whole thing that means it's meaningless. If you have a judge that could be, they say some rabbis can't be bought, they can only be rented. Okay? That's not a compliment, by the way. They can only be rented for a certain time. But you know what? But that's what it's all about. You have to have someone that's willing to put his neck on the line and even go against a popular cause. You have the gvir of the town comes in, the rich guy of the town, and he's accusing the schlepper in the back of the room, the water carrier, okay, the water boy. So you have these two guys. The judge thinks to himself, come on, I'm gonna rule against the gvir. I'm gonna rule against this guy that just built a shul, that he paid for all this money for a shul, and then he bought all the new books in the shul, and he paid for the whole Hebrew school and did all of that. I'm gonna rule against him. I can't rule against him. So the rabbi plays games in his head. Or he does exactly the opposite. He says, you know what, I'm going to screw this guy. I don't care what the rich guy argues. Here's the poor guy, the water boy. He has hardly anything to eat. This guy's sitting on $25 million. I'm going to screw this guy. Watch this. Okay? And the case comes before the judge, and he doesn't make he has pity on the poor water boy, and he rules like the water boy. That's also not right. If the Gvir is right, the Gvir is right. That's why it's very, very difficult. One of the hardest things Moses, he couldn't find, all the criteria that he wanted to set up of judges, wise and strong and bride-free and character perfect and smart and learned. He only could find a certain amount of the criteria. Couldn't find people to match all of the criteria. So you figure, okay, 5 out of 7 is not bad. If I can't find, but honesty had to be one of them. Now we'll just end with this story. I told this story a number of times. In the olden days, one of the reasons why the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, was successful, because a lot of people didn't have faith in the rabbinate, because the rabbinate many times were bought. See, people could buy rabbis' positions. If I had a very rich father-in-law and he wanted me to be rabbi of Long Beach, he'd pay the elders, the guys who make the decisions. He'd pay them, and they would hire me, even though I might not be the right guy for Long Beach. I might be the worst candidate, but so many people lost their faith in the rabbinate because you don't know. So this one case illustrates the story. I told this a number of times. I love this story. It's one of the best stories. So one time, this one guy who was he was a middle contributor to the show, middle class guy. He went into partnership with 3 powerful people in the community, and of course, like many partnerships, it fell apart. Okay, so they went to Din Torah. It was clear beyond a shadow of a doubt that this guy was in the right. But the rabbi who heard the case voted in the favor of the 3 rich guys. Okay, this single individual guy, he wasn't very happy about it, but he said, you know what, I'm going to listen, I'm going to adhere to the ruling. That's the way the ruling goes, that's the way it's going to be. But I want to tell you a story. He tells everybody in the room, if you just give me a couple of minutes, I want to tell you a story. So this is a story within a story. Now I have to remember what the original point was. The guy says, one day, I'm doing business, and I'm standing on the railroad tracks of this certain town. And all of a sudden, it's Friday morning, and I'm ready to go home for Shabbos. All of a sudden, from a distance, I see a guy running towards me. He's running. He says, sir, wait. He comes over to me, he says, sir, I need to ask you a big favor. What's the favor? He says, last week on Friday, my wife gave birth to a little baby boy. Okay, today is his bris. In this particular town, we have 11 Jewish families. Why 11? Because in case one guy's out of town, we should have a minyan. So we were able to put together 11 families. Just happens today that 2 guys are out of town, and we would like to have a bris for the minyan. You don't need a bris you don't need a minyan for a bris, but it would be nice. I think to myself, you know what? It's Friday. The guy says to me, listen, don't come for the bris, but my wife made a brisket to die for. You're never going to taste that brisket like my wife made. Oh, hear about the brisket? Okay. I say, I'm willing. I go to the bris. After the bris, we sit down, the brisket from heaven. It's not a regular brisket, this was a brisket from heaven. The guy tells me, listen, I know you want to rush back, but tonight, for a Sabbath meal, my wife makes a gefilte fish to die for. I figure, listen, if it's half as good as the brisket, I decide, I'll stay for Shabbos. So Friday night, we sit down, the gefilte fish. Ooh la la. I couldn't believe what kind of gefilte fish is. This literally from heaven filtered. This is nothing. Tomorrow, she makes a chult. It's renowned from one town to the other. I come the next day, I sit down with the chult. Can't believe the chult. It's literally, it fell down from Gan Eden. It came literally from heaven, this chult. He says, this is nothing. Tonight, for Shalosh Shudas, the 3rd meal on the Sabbath, my wife makes a potato kugel. You're going to literally die when you taste this potato kugel. He comes to the Shalosh Shudas, the afternoon meal, he eats it. He never tasted such a potato kugel. It's unbelievable. I says nothing. Tonight for the Malav Malka, the 4th meal of saying goodbye to the Sabbath, my wife makes a pickled herring. Wait, come there Saturday night, eat. I never tasted such a piece of pickled herring. He says, you think this is something? This food on Shabbos was nothing. On Sunday morning, she makes blintzes from cheese. I'm telling you, if you ate blintzes like this, I sit down Sunday morning to the blintzes. I never tasted such blintzes. The guy kept me there for 4 days. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I have to go home already. How much is it? I can't stay anymore. Every day with these meals, I have to go. The guy says, okay, you're going home? I have to go. He says, okay, here's a bill. Here's a bill. 100 zlotys. And I look at him and say, what's this bill? You stayed 4 days in my house. You ate my meals. It cost 100. Wait, it's free? Here. I say, are you out of your mind? Are you crazy something? You invited me here from the bris on Friday. I said, listen, the bris I'm not charging you. If you look at the bill, the bris is a freebie. But everything else, you ate the chalt on Shabbos, no? Yeah. You liked it, of course. You ate the pickled ham, yeah. You ate the blintz, yeah. So wait, you think money comes from heaven? I'm indignant. I said, are you crazy? Let's go to the rabbi. Let's go to the rabbi of the city. Hey, you come to the rabbi of the city. Okay, we sit down. The rabbi still looks at the plaintiff and says, "What do you say?" I says, "Well, listen, I'll tell you. I invited it. No, you asked first the defendant. The defendant, what do you say?" He said, "Listen, I was standing peacefully minding my own business on the railroad tracks. I was ready to go home. This Michiganer, obviously, is a nut, comes running up to me and entices me to come to the bris. I don't want to even go to the bris. I don't care about the kid. He tells me a brisket. I start with a brisket. I come there, the guy tells me about the knishes, about herring, about potato kugel, about blintzes, kishke, cholent. The guy fed me. I said, okay, fine, hospitality. Then I'm ready to leave on Wednesday morning. The guy presents me with a bill for 100 zlotys. I'm a guest at this guy's house. He gives me a bill for $100. Okay, the rabbi says, listen, what do you say, the plaintiff? He said, listen, I'm not charging him for the bris because the bris is a mitzvah. I would never think about charging him for the bris. But everything else, ask him, Rabbi, did you enjoy the knishes? Yes. Did you enjoy the kushka? Yes. Did you enjoy the shofar? He admits he enjoyed everything. I figure for that, he should pay. Everything costs money now. Who gives no free lunches in this town? The rabbi listens, and he rules like the plaintiff, he owes him 100 zlotys. He's right. Oh, I'm so angry. I'm so angry. I take the 100 zlotys, I count them 100 zlotys, pay him, I throw him down over there, give him to the table, and I leave so angry I can't believe it. I'm walking out the door. Who's chasing me? This Michiganer. He's saying, sir, I start running. Who knows? The guy's going to tell me, who knows what his wife's making now. So some other thing he's going to entice me with. He says, I'm running. He says, stop. He begs me to stop. Finally he catches up to me. He says, here's your 100 zlotys. 100 zlotys? What is this? So I say, so for 100 zlotys, so why did you make me go through this whole rigmarole? Because I only wanted to show you what kind of a rabbi we have. Okay? All right? Okay? So now you get the story within the story, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now you get the story. So that was all part. I love this story. I love this story. Now, the rabbi was no slouch. So the rabbi said to him, you know what? I hear your story. Let me tell you a story. It says one time two guys came into a city. It was Friday afternoon. They were carrying $1,000 worth of gold coins. They didn't know what to do. Who do you trust in the city? So they figured one guy they can trust is the rabbi. They trust the rabbi. He says, okay. They come into the rabbi's office. They say, listen, we're visiting here in town. We have $1,000 worth of gold coins. We don't know what to do, Rabbi. Will you hold it for us? He says, yes, but I want to be above reproach. I want to write a start. I want to write a contract. So do me a favor. I need witnesses. Go call Tim and Mark. They live right around the corner. Go call Tim and Mark. They come in there. Okay, listen, gentlemen. These two gentlemen are visiting. I want to write, Rabbi Perelmuter, has received 1,000 gold coins to be returned at the completion of Shabbos on this and this date, this and this year. Tim, will you sign? Sign. Mark, sign. You see the golden coins? Rabbi puts it away. He finishes. They have a beautiful Shabbos in town. Then, Saturday night, the rabbi's sitting in his office and he's studying. And there's a knock on the door. The two visitors are here. They come into the rabbi's office. And they say, Rabbi, we want to go on and get on our way. We'd like the money back. Money? What are you talking about? Well, before Shabbos we came to 1,000. What? Who? What? I saw you before Shabbos. Shabbos I'm busy. I go to the mikveh, prepare for Shabbos. I never saw you before in my life. What are you talking about? They say, Rabbi, the $1,000 is the paper started. We signed a contract. You had a contract written. Contract written? Who? What? Who signed? Tim and Mark. Tim and Mark signed. What are you talking about, please? So why are you wasting my time here? Tim and Mark. Go get Tim and Mark. Okay, they bring Tim and Mark. The rabbi looks at Tim and Mark and thinks, tomorrow, Tim, these two guys here claim that you two guys signed on a piece of paper and I took from them 1,000 rubles. And you guys were here Friday and signed this contract? Both of them shrugged their shoulders. What are you talking about? Friday, we signed a contract. These two visitors are indignant. What are you crazy? We were standing in this office, the 5 of us were in this office. Tim, were you here? No. Mark, were you here? No. Rabbi says, listen, I'm sorry, maybe you guys are hallucinating, maybe you went on a long trip, maybe there's another rabbi in town you gave it to, but certainly not to me. Okay, thank you very much, Tim and Mark, you can go home, you're dismissed. They leave, the rabbi says, here's your $1,000. The two guys say, Rabbi, what did you put us through this? I just wanted to show you what kind of congregants I have. Okay? So it works, so it works, so the rabbis, it works both ways. I like the rabbi's part better. I like when the rabbi, I wanted to show you what kind of a rabbi we have. That works better. But with that thought of mind, we'll go on to next week. All right?
Great.